We're better together with Ann and Heather.
Hi, everybody. This is Better Together with Ann and Heather, and this is our second episode of Just the Two of Us.
Where, if you're following along, we've already done one, and we've done these commitments that we call betterments. They're things that we've learned in our lives that we're sharing with you. Ann has written, how many? 20?
20.
And we've done one. The first one was Stop Ignoring What You Know, and we're on the second one that I'm going to read to you, and then we are going to talk about it a little bit and give a story or two that illustrates how it is active in your own lives.
This is exciting for me.
Okay. Betterment number 2, risk. Looking further. If you're not getting it done, it's on you, son. Ain't nobody else gonna do it for you. May seem simple, sound a little plain. Without you, there is no gain.
Amen.
So that's what we're talking about today, risk. And sometimes risk is hard. Risk is scary. Risk takes a little bravery at times. And risk has consequences. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. But in order to follow this commitment, we thought it would be a good idea for us to share a story or two. And I think we're going to start with a story that Ann has that many of you may know. And it's about a time in her life where she took a risk. And I'm going to ask you to read from your book that you have written. She's written a second book, a follow-up to her book, Call Me Crazy. And we haven't published it yet, so you guys are going to get a sneak peek at what's to come in that book. So I'm going to ask you to read from it.
It's very, very exciting.
It's just a little excerpt. Don't worry, we're not reading you an entire book.
No. So
but it's
the little
good
book
stuff.
of commitments, the Bettermints, has a bigger book that goes along with it. And if you're looking at it, there's a little one and there's a big one, baby and mama book.
Okay.
So this is the second book. It's Call Me Ann.
Because the first one was Call Me Crazy, and they did.
Exactly. So now you can just say my name. Say my name. Book 2. The Beginning of Love. Call Me Ann. Now, I also have a Post-it in the front of my book that says 0 fucks on it.
I wrote that.
Which is a note that Heather wrote and put on the wall when we decided to go into a partnership together and talk about all of these things that we have the pleasure of sharing with you. So I will go to each one of the commitments has a chapter, and we are going to go right into
risk.
All right, let's jump in. Chapter 2, experiment. I first understood that my life could and would be told in decades rather than years when I was recently on a podcast promoting a project and they introduced me as Ann H., the first sexually fluid person to go public. While I was wondering what flavor I would be, being liquid and all, I hesitated to define for myself what that meant exactly and allow them to distill for me what that meant for them to define me as such. And what it boiled down to was that I went both ways and stood up for the right to do it. I was more flattered than offended to be certain I had so many questions to ponder, and yet for the purpose of the interview, chose to embrace the intent of the comment, whether I was correct or not, as a compliment, understanding that to an interviewer 2 decades younger than me, I had imprinted something that hadn't existed to this generation until I did. And I thought that was pretty cool. It evolved my understanding of the moment I had participated in with Ellen's leadership that planted the seed that has now blossomed from thought into law. It is now legal for gay couples to get married in this country, a right that did not exist at the time, and marry who they choose. There is nothing in my life I am prouder to have participated in, other than childbirth, of course. This was the moment for me that defined my willingness to participate without question in the boldest, bravest truth someone was speaking, demanding equality regardless of gender and making it law. He, she did not matter to me. This beacon of truth was beaming light in an electric blue suit across the room at the Oscars Vanity Fair party through a woman named Ellen DeGeneres. And I was fluid enough to acknowledge the human being who was accepting the responsibility of being the vessel for that message and have the honor of standing by her side for the portion of time she needed me there. Simply put, exquisite doesn't have gender. When I was first introduced to Ellen that night, she knew who I was. I did not have a clue about her, which she found shocking, understandably so. She was coming out on national television on her TV show the Tuesday following this Sunday night. It was to be monumental. Oprah was going to be there. Who could have predicted how my life would change? Put simply, I fell in love with a woman, and I was also a woman who hadn't loved a woman before. Voila, sexually fluid. A press junket is what happens a day or so before a movie premiere in a hotel, depending on the size and scope of the movie, how nice the hotel. This particular one was at the Four Seasons Beverly Hills, as Volcano was intended to hit big, knocking the other Volcano movie out of the park. Press is invited from all over the country to hole up in room after room to interview the director, producers, and cast to be released to various media outlets after the premiere. That's where all the clips you see of us being interviewed about how great the experience was, how blessed we feel to be a part of the project come from. And most of it's true. You can always tell when it's bullshit. We know what we see, right? It was Wednesday. I had asked Ellen to join me for lunch in the suite they had set aside for me to rest in the day after her hugely successful coming out episode on national TV the night before, the puppy episode. Timeline. That was Tuesday. This was Wednesday. Premiere of Volcano Thursday, the very next night. When I entered the room, the first thing I saw was 4 suits standing, arms crossed, staring intently at, as I walked further in and could see, Ellen, sitting in an armchair. There was a heavy silence and the thickest air I had ever walked into. What's going on? I asked. As far as I had remembered, I had only invited Ellen to join me. I leaned in to kiss her and was met with pure resistance as she looked me in the eye and told me I should listen. I straddled the arm of where she was sitting and grabbed her hand, watching intently as the suits shifted, wondering who would speak first. As I held the hand of the woman who had earned Hero of the Month, the face on the cover of Time magazine's Choice for Bravery, the first of our time to stand against all odds for the right to choose to love, these are the words I heard spoken. You can't take Ellen to the Volcano premiere tomorrow night, Anne. To which I replied, what are you talking about? Ellen pleaded with me to understand that they were right. Now was my moment. It was what she had warned me about only 3 nights prior when I first met her. You can't risk it, Ellen said, then assured me with all the love in her heart that it was okay. We had plenty of time. There was talk of how little we knew each other, how recently it had been since we met. Would you be telling me this if my date was George Clooney, I asked. The first time you experience discrimination in the eyes of the faces that represent you because they see you is the moment you decide who you are as an artist. I had already decided who I was as a person. I hadn't been confronted as an artist until this moment. I looked at Ellen. She looked at me, consoling, like, it's okay. Do this. We'll deal with your conundrum over it when it's over. I'll be waiting for you at home. You're fired, was all I could think to say. Get the fuck out of here. There's not one moment that has defined my life more than that one. Anne and the artist, Anne and the daughter, Anne, were all the same person. I had no idea how complicated that decision would make my life. I had driven myself to the Vanity Fair Oscar party in my vintage Toyota truck with no brakes, wearing a secondhand emerald green fake suede car coat over the only full-length black dress that had been bought for me by my ex, Steve Martin, to look appropriate for something or other, and barely kept myself standing as my first steps onto a red carpet were greeted with photographers calling my name and flashing bulbs towards me as if they were interested in me. How or why they knew my name was question one I demanded the answer to, thankfully, spotting my agent mere feet away from the entrance I had stumbled inelegantly through, baffled and clueless. While she was delivering an explanation, I found myself staring out into a sea of Oscar winners and nominees, chattering and congratulating, a black tie extravaganza of stature and statues, literally. Who's that? I interrupted. Can I meet her? I asked Ellen why she was beaming so bright. She was shocked I didn't know. I was amazed she had her own TV show. She was amazed I didn't know I was the it girl. She had to tell me so. Oh, goodness, all I ever knew was that I was not it. Religion had drilled into me from the day I was born that there was only one true it, and his name was Jesus Christ. And he was the only it deserving of our love or adoration. No, I'm not it. Not it. I chose to take Ellen to the premiere. Ellen and I were ushered out of the movie theater at my premiere of Volcano before the movie ended, led through a back entrance and shoved into our limousine so that there would be no pictures of us taken at the after party. The next day, I was fired from a multi-million picture deal by Fox, then blacklisted.
Wow.
That was an interesting week for me.
That's risk.
That's
risk at its, not at its ultimate. I could probably think of something riskier, but that is still an incredible choice you made.
Yes.
And I'm going to ask you a question that I know you've been asked before, and I actually know the answer to it, but I want our viewers to hear, because I think that this is an important part of what we're talking about today. When you're faced with a difficult decision and you choose to take a risk, there are consequences, as we said at the beginning, and some of them aren't always good in the immediate. But as you sit here 30-some years later, is that how long it is? 25?
How old do you think I am?
No, 25 years later? However many years later.
Yeah, I think it is.
Do you regret making that choice, knowing the ramifications it had?
Oh, I absolutely do not regret it. It doesn't mean that I couldn't have been more elegant in my understanding of how to approach it. And I think that's where naivete kind of comes in one sense. The fact that I didn't really know what the repercussions could or would be probably made it a little bit softer cushion for me,
right?
By not knowing, even though Ellen was telling me that it was going to be disastrous.
Well, I think it's interesting that, she was and still is applauded for her role in moving the needle in acceptance in sexuality, yet she was the one who was telling you not to do it.
I know, that was so interesting to me too. She wouldn't hold my hand in public. She wouldn't do, it was so funny. And she was defending my right to not stick up for the rights that she was fighting for. And that also shows kind of how far we've come, which I can appreciate looking back.
Actually, now I know how long it was, because just maybe a year or two ago, I know that Ellen got together with Oprah. And we just had Jolie Fisher on, and they did kind of a reunion and a look back 20 years later.
I wasn't invited.
From that episode of coming out and all that Ellen did. And I thought it was very interesting that you were really just kind of cut out of that piece of history in her looking back on those times. But that's
kind of systematically,
yes.
And I think that's part of why I have such gratitude for you, Heather, because you have insisted that this story be told. The reason we tell story is because the truth in story is what fills the gap of all the lies that are hidden behind the doors. Even if it's what did you say? I was the original canceled.
I do. I think that, and if you all think about that listening, I do think that Anne was the original celebrity that was plumb canceled.
I mean, come on.
You were canceled.
I was canceled.
You were canceled before that was even a thing.
Isn't that funny? So 2 things that I've done first. I was canceled first.
Yeah. But it is true. It is true. But I do think it's, and we've talked about this before, that it's interesting to look back on how different things are.
Well, let's get to risk, because the reason that I tell my stories, and I think the reason why, Heather, you think it's important, not only is it a part of history, truth, and I've now come to embrace that, but the reason we do it is because there's so many secrets in this world, and the secrets hide the lies. The lies are the things that create disease, in my opinion. And so when we shed light, when we're on Better Together, the reason we share story is to bring in truth to help balance out the things that we don't know. And so whether or not the risks are, headlines. That's not the point. The point is when we're faced with that decision, we are asked by the universe to contemplate who we are, what our humanity is, what it is that our purpose serves, and how we define ourselves within it. And the reason why I don't regret what I did is because the truth of my conviction and belief and the proof that I have of that is that when you're doing something in the correct form of love, if you're serving 100% connection to what it is that you believe is right and true, it will always pan out to lead to more truth. It looks like it's a winding road. And so from outside, it may seem not as pleasurable, my choice, as, Ellen has a 20,000, square foot house. Whatever it is that we look at as the carrot, the thing that dangles, the thing that looks like a successful choice, determines how our life is going to end up. And I have ended up exactly where I want to be.
And it's funny that you say it like that, because we've talked about this, and I think we might have talked about this on our last commitment, and it speaks to it again, the more difficult choice when you're faced with trying to make a decision, the more difficult choice, the one that takes more work, that is usually the right one. And as you sit here today, I just wonder how you would feel about making a choice that wasn't true to yourself, albeit we'd be at your beautiful house in Montecito or something.
I might be richer.
Let me rethink this.
Wait,
risk
hold
thing.
on a second. Well, waiter, can I reorder my destination?
No, but the truth is, I think I actually have faith that in the end, you're going to get to the same place you would have been. And it's just a windier road, and frankly a more interesting road, to be honest.
Is funny because that's a perspective that people have on Hollywood. How could you not? You're the it girl. You've got to be it, right? You're gonna have fame and romance and what? You can date famous people or whatever people think is the win of all of it. You can live in a mansion and date somebody famous. And I think that it's part of my pleasure to share that those things are not what get you up in the morning and make you excited about your day, because you are in the truth of your life and sharing it. And it is. I wish it could have gone a little bit faster. I mean, I'm 20 years after, and it would have been nice if the road maybe was less long. But that's why we share our stories on Better Together.
I don't think I would have met you. I don't think we would have been here doing this.
See that? That's why we're exactly where we want to be.
Probably your life would have taken you in a different direction. And I think that that's the other thing about making decisions, is it weaves you on this, not that meeting me is worth losing a $10 million contract. But,
way more. Way more, baby.
but I'm serious in that. And the decisions you make, really shape the path. And if everybody listening, if you go back and you kind of track the decisions in your life you've made, you'll realize that they bring you to where you are now. It starts with maybe a partner you met. If you hadn't gone to a certain place, you wouldn't have met them that started, or a friend that you have that introduced you to somebody, or you can just really track that. And it's fascinating. I mean, not all of us have headlining stories about risk, but I think that people can kind of relate in their own lives.
Well, because we look at a decision every single day. Our first commitment, stop ignoring what you know. We are faced with these decisions all the time. And when we make the one that doesn't go with our gut, as we call it, or the heart, as I call it, we know it. And if we deny ourselves that knowledge, then we're chasing the thing that covers up the fact that we know that we did the thing that we shouldn't have done. And then we either chase that or bury it, but the further we get from it on that road and on that choice, the harder it is to come back in line with your truth. So what we want to encourage on Better Together is know what you see right now. Stay in the moment to decide right now, because it will be so much faster.
And recognize those moments that is a risk, that the decision is a risk. And I'm not talking about stupid decisions like,
Well, tell me one of your risky. Tell me one of your risky choices. I know you have one. I know it.
I can think of one when I was in high school. I was a freshman in high school, and I was in the dumb math class.
What does that mean?
And I'm not talking like pre-algebra dumb. I'm talking like basic math dumb. So the people in this class are struggling. I can tell you a whole story on why I blame that on the nuns. Much of things that have gone bad in my life.
Anything bad,
I can blame it on the nuns,
absolutely.
but I can blame me being in that math class on my nuns. But so I'm in this math class, and we have a teacher, Mr. Hinkle. I think I can say his name because he's got to be dead by now. And I knew Mr. Hinkle. Mr. Hinkle, now I look at him, he was struggling too. He used to, we would hang out at a place called the Deli. And I don't even know if that was the name of it, but we called it the Deli. It was where we like hung out and,
the hotspot for teens who wanted to skip school.
Stonerville. And I would see him going in there and buying like fifths of vodka. And so, he had to teach. We're in Palos Verdes. He has to teach these spoiled kids, these dumb spoiled kids. And he's, he probably wasn't a happy guy. But he one day in class said to a kid who was overweight and, gay in the 80s in Palos Verdes, which couldn't have been an easy thing. He said to the kid, if you studied as much as you ate, you'd be getting straight A's.
Oh, Lord.
And I could tell that the kid was he was welling up. He was starting to cry. And I just thought, distract. And I also thought, fuck you, dude. So I stood up. And I just said, you are such a piece of shit, teacher, you motherfucker. I spewed out every single cuss word that I think I knew. And then I just walked out. And
you made that fat kid's day.
I don't know. Like when I look back on it, I hope I didn't make it more of a scene for him, because in the end, what ended up happening was I got expelled. I was kicked out of school. I remember I had stormed off and I'm like, shit, I got to go back and get my purse, because I didn't even carry books. I just needed my purse,
Where's my little handbag? But you stormed off like, I'm out of here.
Where's that little Louis Vuitton handbag, okay. No, you
yes,
don't.
No, I do. Yeah. You still wear it.
Yeah. So, no, not that one. Anyways, so I had to go back for my bag and he started screaming. I'm like, save it. You got me expelled from school. And I was expelled from school. For the whole year, I had to go to our rival high school.
For calling out the truth.
And I did not know anybody there. And it was scary and uncomfortable. But you know what? I would do it all over again.
That's why we're friends. I mean, for real, to stand up for something that you don't know. We don't always know what the repercussions are going to be.
I'm just thinking this now, but you know what happened at that school too? It was a moment that I also learned something about kindness. I went to this school that I didn't know anybody, and there was an older girl at my school. Her name was Amy Barr, and I will never forget this. She set up people to meet me, like the older kids, to go and say hello to me. And I didn't know her, and it was such an act of kindness and consideration to know that I was going to go there and feel scared and uncomfortable.
Sure.
And I appreciated it so much. And it might have been the moment that I really learned the value in that. And by the way, as I'm saying this now, guess how I met you? You were uncomfortable in a situation where you didn't know people. And because I learned that lesson from Amy, who knows, maybe that's why I was so conscious of that for you. So that's why I'm saying you never know. And I didn't even think about this until I started talking about it. So you never know how things like that trace back.
Well, and how they impact you, because and I think that's one of the things that we can say, to be a person who reflects something to others. We don't know what the impact is going to be. I don't know if Amy knew, that this would become something that she blossomed in you as something that felt good, and you wanted to do that for other people. And that's why it's so important to be an example. You don't have to get you don't know the feedback. Just, give it. You could impact another Heather's life.
It impacted your life, maybe. Who knows?
I know. I mean, it's
so it's It's
Pay forward.
It's a thing.
We are going to wrap this up. And I do want to encourage the risk you take, the risks you take, because when you get on the other side of that and understand the power of standing up for yourself or another or anything else, it's worth it. The risk is worth it.
And we'd love to hear your stories too of risk. So please drop them in the Instagram or email us at bettertogether@strawhutmedia.com, because we'd love to hear from you guys. And I think it's time for a no thanks. Yes, please. Do we got one?
Absolutely.
Do you have one? I'll come up with a no thanks.
No thanks. Yes, please. Yes, please.
I say yes, please, to being the example for others around you of one that takes a chance to do something that may not be the popular vote.
And I'm going to make it simple. I'm going to say yes, please, to just growing a pair. Just grow a pair.
That's yes, please. We both did a yes, please. Cheers. Let's do a commitment cocktail. We're yesing today.
Okay. And guess what? On grow a pair, I think on this, growing a pair. Our commitment cocktail.
Okay.
We're doing a cocktail for each commitment.
Okay.
And I picked this one. I think this calls for a shot of tequila.
Wow. Cheers.
Ooh, that Casamigos is smooth. Well done. Well done,
Until
George
next
Clooney.
time, everybody. Living love and kindness.
And don't be a dick.
Cheers.
And a big thanks to our Better Together team. That's Ryan Tillotson, Sebastian Alcala.
And you, Elizabeth Keener.
Aw, thanks, Ryan. And of course, Ann and Heather.
We're better together with Ann and Heather. Straw Hut Media.